to the 7th plenary session of the 63rd Labour Economics Conference. This is the YK Alagh Memorial Lecture. He was a former conference president and a member of, and a president of ISLE also for quite some time. We lost him earlier this year. And this memorial lecture, the first memorial lecture, is being organized in memory of Professor YK Alagh to celebrate his contributions to the field of labor economics. The lecture is being delivered by Professor Indira Hirway. She is Director and Professor of Economics, Center for Development Alternatives, Ahmedabad. I request you, ma'am, to please come on the dais. Ma'am. The lecture is being chaired by Professor K.P. Kannan. He is Honorary Fellow and former Director, Center for Development Studies, Thiruvananthapuram. And I would now invite the Director for Institute for Human Development and the Editor of Indian Journal of Labour Economics, Professor Alagh Sharma, to speak a few words about Professor YK Alagh and also introduce the chair of the session.
As most of you might be knowing, that we lost Professor YK Alagh very recently. Professor YK Alagh needs no introduction. He was one of the most eminent economists of this country, who contributed immensely in various areas, agriculture, rural development, trade, industry, and all that. Apart from being an economist, he was probably very few people were as involved as policy making as Professor Alagh was. He was Minister for Planning and Power in the Government of India, Member Planning Commission, Chairman Agricultural Prices Commission, Chairman Bureau of Industrial Costs and Prices, so many things. Other than that, he was an institution builder. His association, lifelong association with Sardar Patel Institute, many institutions he helped building, including Institute for Human Development, where I work. In Indian Society of Labour Economics, he was also conference president, but apart from that, attended several conferences, came several times, and at the time of his death, he was Press Chairman of the Indian Society of Labour Economics Research and Development Trust, in fact, which is the parent body of ISD. Because of paucity of time, Professor Alagh's CV is so long, so diversified, there is no time to go in detail, but really we have lost, society has lost a patron, supporter, and academic community, policy making world has lost one of its most eminent member. So with these words, I pay my tribute to Professor Alagh, and that is why we thought that this year, at least we should organize one lecture in his memory. Thank you.
Dear friends, thank you, Alagh, for introducing Professor Yogindra Alagh. I won't say it's a pleasure to preside over this, because it's a memorial lecture and we all feel a sense of loss for a personality, for a towering personality, both literally and figuratively. He straddled the spaces of academic scholarship and policy making with equal ease and with tremendous contributions on several dimensions of India's challenge for an inclusive development, including agriculture, water management, development, poverty line, a whole range of issues. I have great pleasure in introducing my longtime colleague in the ISLE, Professor Indira Hirway. Indira Hirway has been a very source of inspiration for several younger generation people for her sustained work and concern on issues relating to labor and employment. Currently, she is associated with the Center for Development Alternatives in Ahmedabad. He is an associate of the Levy Economics Institute of Bard College in New York. She was a national fellow of the Indian Council of Social Science Research. She has authored several books and articles. I don't have to tell you. She she did a pioneering work in initiating studies on time use surveys in India more than once. And I think that has unleashed a series of work based on the availability of time use data. So I have now great pleasure in inviting Indira to deliver the Yogendra Alagh Memorial Lecture. I made a special request to Indira ji because of the time constraint in the last day, and she has been very kind enough to agree. It's a written lecture, therefore she might skip certain portions and make it to around 40 minutes or so. Thank you for your cooperation.
I am not elaborating on any formalities, but I would just say in the beginning itself that I am indeed very privileged to deliver this Professor Y.K. Alagh Memorial Lecture in this annual conference. A lot has been said about him by Professor Alagh Sharma, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. But what I would like to say this, that he was very well known to me. And when I was in Ahmedabad, since I am in Ahmedabad, I had an opportunity to interact him many times. I found him very friendly. And when he was director of Sardar Patel Institute, the environment was extremely friendly, which was the culture of Sardar Patel Institute, which made easy learning and easy interaction with everybody. He has been an expert economist with excellent records, and you all know about it, so I don't want to elaborate on that. What I would like to speak in his memory is about work and workers in India moving towards inclusive and sustainable development. I am using the new definition of work and workers of ILO and try to find out as to how these definitions in reality work out in the Indian Time Use Survey. We all know that high growth rate has not led to egalitarian economy in the country, and it has created several problems which are discussed in the mainstream economy, such as persistent inequality, inflation, low human development, environmentally non-sustainable development, and highly unequal incomes and assets in the country. However, the same economic growth has also impacted on the other categories of work of ILO also. And this impact has been very serious, and it has created critical concerns for our economy. And I would like to talk about it because these concerns are neglected, if not excluded, by the economy. We all know that ILO's path-breaking resolution on statistics on work, employment, and labor underutilization has expanded the concept of work and redefined categories of work. The work is now defined as any activity performed by persons of any age and sex to produce goods and services for use by others as well as by own use. This is a radically different definition of work, and it has opened up large categories of work to the economy, and I think it's important to study about them. The work here, when I talk about work and work participation here, the work has a short reference period of a week, and participation means that the person has spent at least 1 hour in the last week on this activity. The categories of work are, okay. Now this reflects the commonalities between UNSNA and ILO categories of work. Earlier also it was there, but now it has become more specific in the sense that all the categories of work are now, the new categories of work are in the production boundary. And the general production boundary is outside that, and even voluntary work is divided into 2 parts, some in the production boundary and some outside the production boundary. Employment is defined as activities to produce goods and services for pay and profit or for exchange and barter. A person who worked in the last week on 1 hour on this is, for pay or profit, is a worker. Second category is own use production work, activities to produce goods for own consumption. This is within the production boundary. And the third category is own use production work of services. These services are part of work but outside the production boundary of UNSNA. Now, I am not referring to UNSNA just for the reference, but ILO has given this a main status of work. Third is unpaid trainee work, which is either training in household craft or something, or unpaid apprenticeship, or unpaid training in any manufacturing unit. Voluntary work is of 2 kinds: non-compulsory activities performed without pay or profit, but if it is goods or in the organized sector, organized unit, then it is production boundary, and if it's services outside, then it is not outside the production boundary. Other activities, of course, are compulsory activities. Now, what I would like to focus is that ideally we use time use data here, because ILO also has recommended that to implement the new set of work, one should use modified labor force survey along with a time use module. Now, time use survey in India had several problems, and that's why we cannot really use the way we would like to use, because labor force survey and time use survey do not have any common units in our time use survey, and that's why it's not, time use survey cannot directly enrich labor force survey. Secondly, it's difficult to establish synergy between time use and labor force survey, but we take it as time use sample is representative of the total population, and that's why what is coming out of total population is applicable to the macro level, and that's why we are using this time use survey. I have pointed out earlier in my papers about the problems with the time use survey, that there are 2 kinds of problems of the data. One is about the methodology, and second about the collection of data. I don't want to go into details, but I'll just say that keeping these limitations in mind, we use the data because primarily the limitation was under-reporting of work. Now, this is what we come to know about the ILO work categories in India. This shows that the most important activity for men is employment, while for women it is unpaid work. Women and men, the gap is significant in both of these, but the gap is more in unpaid activities. and employment both, of course. Second thing which is important here is that the production work of goods for sale, for own use, is primarily in rural areas. In urban areas, it is much less. Thirdly, unpaid training is very minimum, just around 1.23%, and as far as the women are concerned, it is less than 1%. And voluntary work also is not significant. It is, and that's why the whole picture gives you this kind of a picture, this kind of an idea about the work categories in India. If you see the time use of these work categories, the minutes also show the similar picture, and surprisingly, unpaid work, trainee work, is again very low, more for women than for, more for men than for women. And voluntary work also, the time spent on it is very, very low. All the time is it on minutes per day. So overall, you can see that this is the picture, and if you consider the categories of minutes here, and then if you consider the sharing of work by men and women, then again the same picture, and it's very significant that voluntary work, unpaid trainee work, etc. are very insignificant, but production of goods for own use is coming out as significant. This categorization has several implications. One is that the overall participation rate of men and women is very high. We have not given here, but we have calculated. It is 82.1 for men and 91% for women. This means that Indians are hard-working people. They are doing either employment, and if they don't get employment, they get into something else, but they are hard-working. There is no question about it. Second thing which comes is that women work harder in terms of participation as well as minutes spent. But despite this hard work, there is persistent unemployment in the sense that work for pay and profit is very low. Well, putting the new employment definition, we have to see that while planning for employment, therefore, one has to see as to where from the labor will be coming and how do we plan. One mistake which is happening in India frequently is that we plan for employment for women without considering their constraint, and that's why these programs are frequently not very successful. Now, this kind of a picture has created several serious concerns for the economy, and we'll be discussing that. One is, of course, production for goods is very important, significant for rural areas, and there is a lot of scope for taking them into the employment by making efforts. This is something very important. Secondly, it's very important that the unpaid trainee work is not important for our economy, which is really needs to be increased. And if you see the time use of time spent on even paid skill training, plus this, plus education levels, the overall picture emerges as a very negative picture, and we are far behind to talk about fourth industrial revolution and something, because more than 70% of our population, 60% of the population is below higher secondary. And if only 10%, 15%, 9% in the case of women, and 14% in the case of men are above higher secondary, how much high tech we can introduce in the economy is a big question. Now the question is, what is care? The first problem emerging from the unpaid work of women is that there is a crisis of care. Now what is care? Care is a physical, social and emotional well-being of human beings. It's a social protection also. It's a human right also. Everybody should get it. It's for well-being, for capabilities, for human development, for human capital formation, for foundation of sustainable development, and it's a social investment for development. Unpaid care at the household level is something which refers to unpaid household services and care work, but this is something important for childhood development, for health and education of not only children, but human beings, and it binds family together, it protects social fabric, and it subsidizes private sector because it provides labor as well as wear and tear of labor, and that's why it subsidizes the private sector, and it also subsidizes the government. In that sense, this is unpaid care at the household level is a privately produced public good by women, and this by men and women, but mostly women. It also subsidizes the government because it takes care of social security and care of disabled, old, and so on and so forth. And that's why this care, household care, is very significant but overlooked by data and other things. Paid care comes from care diamond institutions. It's primarily government or market or social sector, social organizations. And what they call care diamond institutions are providing this care, which takes care of health, education, and many other situations. Now, the crisis of care in India has emerged, which is emerged because the system, the economy, and the society of India is unable to provide adequate care that takes care of human well-being, human capabilities, human development, and human capital formation. So, if you see the care, its demand is rising, but supply is declining. Demand is rising because of the crisis, disasters, aging, nuclear families rising, etc. But supply is declining because women or the government are unable to provide this care. If you see the time use of women, it becomes very clear that 85% of their time, 85% WPR is taking care of household upkeep and not care as such. And only 40 minutes per day is available for child care. And 1 minute is left at the household level for care of disabled, old, sick, etc. So household is unable to provide care, which is very clear. And if you see the government providing care, then we have studied these child care programs earlier, and we find that ICDS is functioning very indifferently. Only in a few states it has some impact, otherwise it doesn't take care of the children as such. In fact, the main thing which is coming out of the evaluation studies is that most of the state governments are not even convinced about the philosophy behind ICDS, that they have a duty to take care of early childhood care. So even child care is not adequate. Anganwadi surveys have been done, studies have been done, which shows that it's overall not very successful. Daycare wise, we have 2007 policy and 2016 policy, but it's not really providing daycare because only 4 lakh people are getting this care. Care of the disabled, similarly we found that only 21% of the disabled get some kind of care which is far from adequate, and they don't have access to training, etc. The idea is they should have normal life and they should be able to live happily with this kind of a situation with their inability, but that care also is unable. Social care, we all know that health, education, nutrition, etc. are very poor, low care, poor care quality, and elitist services. The upper classes are able to access care, all kinds of care, but the lower classes, particularly bottom 40%, are having problems with care. In other words, we have problems with human capability, human development, and human capital. So basic human right is not met. State is not fulfilling its social contract. Poor development is there because of this, and low human development and low care results into development gaps, and growth also suffers because of this. No equal opportunities to develop and lead the lives that people want, and high inequalities take place. Good hospitals, good education, good health, good nutrition is available to either to people at the household level of a higher level or at the other level. Now we come to the second problem, which is emerging from the distribution of time use of the workers of the new categories of work. First is that gender inequalities of women and the disempowerment is emerging very clearly from this. It's a serious concern because it's a question of 49% of the population not treated as equal. Unequal sharing of paid, unpaid work and total work responsibilities is having serious problems for women in terms of accessing opportunities in life. And let me tell you that even when women have hired help, the responsibility remains with women, and this responsibility is a major concern for women in professions also. The book by Sanders on Lean In by Shirley clearly shows that women always struggle between the responsibilities at home and at the market. Unpaid services are inferior is another major problem because there is no visibility in data, there is no visibility in policies. They have no retirement and no pension. It's repetitive and boring, it's a dead-end job, and there is no time, it's a time tax on women, and this kind of division is not because of their efficiency or their willingness, but it's purely social construct. This is something which is bad. But the another thing which is happening along with this is that because of the unequal sharing, women's performance in the labor market is also poor. Mostly they don't enter the labor market as PLFs has shown, but when they enter the labor market, they enter with the burden of care on their shoulder, as a result of which there is no equality to start with in the labor market. Again, they have low human capital and low mobility and other social norms binding them. As a result of it, their performance in the labor market brings them low wages, low diversification, and low opportunities in the labor market, and as a result of which, finally, they end up in overcrowding in low productivity activities. The unequal sharing is at the root of patriarchy. It affects social values, attitudes, customs, distribution of income and wealth, and various institutions and human rights of men and women. And therefore, just because women are sharing this work which is invisible, they suffer in multiple ways in the economy and in the society. Man breadwinner model is still not going whatever we say, and it's still bothering women. So highly non-acceptable inequality is a major problem for the economy. Bottom 30-40% population particularly suffers because they suffer from extreme poverty, no time for anything else, and they are trapped because there is no way they can get out since they have no access to social capital or education or human capital. So there is a big challenge today as to how to transform this power structure so that this unjust and unfair division of labor between men and women is exempt. The third major concern emerging from this is suboptimal use of labor force leading to suboptimal development. It's a huge loss to the macroeconomy because women's low and declining participation rate in the labor market implies that their low contribution to the economy, their potential is not tapped. Secondly, when they perform in the labor market, they also have lower outcomes and their potential is not tapped. Again, if they have low human capital, they are not able to contribute much to the economy. So the growth process also supports the suboptimal use of women labor because the growth does not consider women's requirements, as a result of which, along with neoliberal policies, as studies have shown, women's situation is deteriorating. As we know, this pandemic also had a very negative impact on women. This means that out of the total labor force, a significant section of the labor force is locked into low productivity and low opportunity sectors. We do not have optimal use of labor force, and that's why optimal economic development also. Both ILO and IMF are working on it, and they try to persuade countries to work on unpaid work so that women can participate more and economic growth can take its place, because the demand for care is increasing not only in India but at a global level also. Now, it's not easy to increase women's workforce participation rate because it is not, reduction in unpaid work could be one of the reasons, but it is only necessary condition, not sufficient. Because women's entering into labor market is totally gendered, except for a few people. So what happens is that they dominate in informal work, and the role of the social factors do not allow them to increase. So even if you try to reduce the unpaid services, women's workforce participation will not increase. As recent World Bank study also has shown that women's workforce participation is gendered, and they want work near to the house or home-based work, or they want affordable care. If it's not available, they won't do this. They want flexible timings. There is no safety at work, and so on and so forth. The final result of this is that our economy is not able to use the labor force fully, and this creates problems for development as well as for this. Demand side constraints also are there because these social norms impact on employers also, and macroeconomic conditions also are not enabling, because we have now increasing number of discouraged workers and because of lack of jobs and also unemployment, more of women. Okay. Now, I think I'll cut short this thing, but what strategy I would like to recommend is that we need 4 kinds of approaches on this. One is, these are all macroeconomic approaches. First is public expenditure on overall care in the economy, so that the economy has strong foundation for development. Second is labor market regulation, and third is enabling macroeconomic condition along with finances for development. Public expenditure on care is to satisfy the care-related needs of the economy so as to create a strong foundation of equitable and sustainable development. It includes early childhood care, care-related infrastructure, and social care services. Finally, what happens is that these care facilities should be provided to people either subsidized or at an affordable price, or maybe you allow market to function in a manner that it's provided, or CSOs, civil society organizations can take care of it. This public expenditure on care will have multiplier impact in the economy, in the sense that it will encourage shift of some women to the mainstream economy, and shift, because the care will be shifted in the mainstream economy, it will be reduced, and time also will be reduced. So time and energy and freedom of women will expand if you provide these care services, which will help in providing them time and energy to access new opportunities in the labor market. Second thing is that provision of care facilities will open up new opportunities to women in a more possible ways, because women will be able to either relax for their health, because we know that unpaid work is one of the reasons why we have poor nutrition of women and children. Second, it will have them opportunity to improve capabilities, and care facilities will also help in trigger many factors, many processes which will promote sound economic development in the economy. The second recommendation is about the moving towards gender equal labor market. Gender equal, we don't have any gender equal labor market right now, as we have pointed out, and others also have pointed out in the meeting here, conference here. The gender choice of women has put them into low productivity area. Predominance in informal work has restricted their opportunities in the mainstream economy, and because of this, predominance in informal work and the time base, what has happened is that labor market is not functioning in favor of women's participation or tapping women's labor. So second reform that we want is education and skill training for women, maternity benefits, etc. But let me go into the specific steps that we need for labor market. Main thing is maternity leave for women and men both, equal pay for equal work to all, positive discrimination of women in critical areas, regulated working hours and flexible working arrangements. And let me tell you that if we really want gender equality in the labor market, in the final analysis, not only they will share, men and women will share equal unpaid work, but they will also share equal paid work. This is a distant dream. It's a question of opportunity, but nothing else. Finally, I would talk about the macroeconomic policies, which are very important. As has been pointed out again and again, that obsession with economic growth should be replaced by employment-intensive policies, but here you must add equal opportunities for productive employment for men and women is important. Again, ensuring care and well-being, as we said, is very important for both men and women. So human development, human capital formation, everything has to be for men and women. Monetary policy should be not just for price stability, but also for employment generation, again for men and women. And fiscal policy instruments also should be assessed based on their impact on gender also, because taxation, borrowings, subsidies, etc. are impacting adversely on women's unpaid work and women's potential. Micro policy should also be assessed, every micro policy should be assessed based on their impact on unpaid work of men and women both, such as trade liberalization. We know that trade liberalization has raised employment of women, but it has harmed women more than given them any positive development. Privatization has affected women very badly, and also deregulation policies have impacted badly on women. So our macroeconomic development, macroeconomic policies have not really been engendered, and they have not taken care of the potential of the macroeconomy into the picture. So finally, I would like to say that when we include ILO categories of work, and consider the time-use data, it provides additional insight into the deficiencies of the economy, and critical concerns are highlighted in the process. So these are neglected by the mainstream economy, but these are very important concerns. And this discussion calls fresh attention to care, to labor market policies and regulations, and macroeconomic policies. So I'm very happy to conclude that the new categories of ILO has expanded the dimension of macroeconomic policies of labor market and of care and human capital formation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Indira ji, and for giving this memorial lecture. And I thank you all for your patient attendance. Thank you.